what a V8's for. That's pretty much it.
Hello and welcome to the Monday, March 21st, 2011 City Council Informational. We'll call the meeting to order. We'll start off with the City Council staff report from Deborah A. Owens, City Clerk, Chief of Council Operations.
Thank you and good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. A couple of things just to briefly remind you about. We have a working session on Thursday at 4. We had originally scheduled that for 6 o'clock, but 4 o'clock seems to work better for the members of the council, and that's really just to talk about those Northwest District applicants and move forward with those to the forum, which will happen the following week. In addition, for tonight's 7 o'clock agenda, there are no proposed amendments or changes to it. It looks like it's pretty much straightforward for that agenda as well. And also, there's a 4 o'clock audit committee meeting tomorrow here in the chambers. That's it. Thank you very much.
Any questions of Deborah? Any questions about our procedures for replacing the Northwest District councilman? That process? Okay, good. We'll move on to our Public Services Committee. We have a report from Chairman Councilor Anderson, or one of the other members if there's, I'm catching Kenny off guard.
Okay. At our last meeting, we did discuss administrative rules, and that has been passed on to the council, and we will be proceeding with draft of that in tonight's meeting.
No, if I may, that will be scheduled for the first Monday in April. That's our next council meeting that it hit the agenda deadlines for. And that will be a first reading to change as an ordinance. It really just clarifies the executive orders and the organizational chart of the mayor's staff.
Also, we received from the police department the changes in the ordinance on how they handle materials that are confiscated from pawn shops. I'm sorry. And we have just gotten that those changes, and we're reviewing those at this time. And that's pretty much it right now for us, I believe. Anything else? Sue, Michelle, Vernon? Yeah.
Okay, very good. City Council open discussion. Any items anybody like to cover? Well, seeing none, I guess I will start it off with the conversation I had last week with several, or I guess most of you on the phone on Wednesday, referring to the $3.8 million that's left over in the CIP budget and what we should do with that. I think I was able to reach everybody. And then on Thursday, we had another meeting. Council leadership and Councilor Erpenbach met with the mayor, and I shared with him my intentions and as well the council's intentions. That didn't go so well. You may have read about it, but it did not go well. He's got other plans to do things with that, but I wanted to bring it up today for full discussion about what are our intentions. Certainly that money is set aside for CIP projects. Generally, it's roads, certainly other buildings, and some of the conversations that we had were on Wednesday were that the consensus was that we did want to spend it on roads. There was also a further discussion about the scoreboard out at the arena, and it certainly needs to be replaced or updated. I think we all know that. So we've got some ideas of where that money should be spent. I was looking for a list of projects from the Public Works Director on items that could be shovel-ready for roads that could be built immediately, but that's a tough task. We do have a list that Tracy Turbeck gave us of the items that were carried forward or that essentially the holdbacks where they occurred. I think it's maybe fair to give Mark a little more time to give us the information that we need in order to make some further decisions on which roads could be addressed with new construction as soon as possible. But, you know, I've got some intersections in my district that need a little help, but that's not what this meeting is about. I wanted to include all the council. I could have come forward with an amendment, you know, tonight or maybe even the next coming week on where we should spend this money based on what I think. But I wanted to have a discussion with the whole council so we could decide amongst ourselves what is best for the city of Sioux Falls. So I will continue to work on that and work with Public Works to get a better list that we can all work on and look at. But does anybody else have any comments or discussions on that they'd like to?
Greg?
Yes, Councilor Entenmann.
I think it's a great idea to have some discussion about this, but you know, I think we do need to make sure that we do it in conjunction with the respective city departments too, to make sure that we're ready to go, like you said, shovel-ready type projects or whatever they might be. I think it's some good discussion, but as I have stated before to the city directors during the budgeting process, you know, if you've got some money to turn back to the city, there's nothing wrong with that. I always have had a lot of problems with governments. The perception is that if we've got the money allocated to us, we better spend it, because if we don't spend it, we're not going to get it back next year. And in my discussions during last year's budget, you know, I told them, hey, look, if there's money to turn back, great. You know, what a deal if we can save money. And if in the reverse case, if you need additional funds because there's an exhibited need for it, come to the city council, ask for the funds. If it makes sense, we're going to give you the additional allocation. While I think the discussion is good, in no way do I want the citizens to think that we're out here to spend $3.8 million, because we were able to save $3.8 million in a very tough economic year, as we all realize. And we all have wish lists, and we all have things that we want to do. But I think it has to be a team effort that we get this thing figured out and that it makes sense for the part of the city. There's some great things, these holdbacks that we have here in this list that we just received. There's some great points that are in that list, too. And I think it makes for some really good conversation.
Councilor Erpenbach.
I guess I would add to that. I agree that we need to prioritize some of those things that have been held back, but I would never call this a wish list. These holdbacks were in the budget for 2010, and this money that we're talking about is 2010 sales tax money that the people of Sioux Falls, you know, as they lived their lives, they spent this money, and part of it went to the city. I think we need to take into account the things that are priorities for the people of the city of Sioux Falls, and I think it starts with those holdbacks, and I think we need to very carefully look at those as priorities. And I don't want to hear the wish list word, because that's not what these are. These are priorities for the citizens.
Councilor Brown.
And I just want to clarify something, too. Departments each year return money to the city budget. So I don't want anyone leaving the room pretending that city directors go out and spend everything that is allocated to them. That's not the case. I think on average it's 5 to 8% that they return back to the city budget every year. So this is not a new issue. It's just we need to figure out the best way to put the taxpayer dollars to service.
Councilor Anderson.
Yes, I have a question for Mark Cotter on this, if it's okay.
Oh, yeah.
Mark, I don't know if you've gotten the holdback list yet, or if you had a chance to view it.
I don't have it with me tonight, Counselor.
Okay. Have you had a chance to take a look at it, or?
I was certainly involved with the discussions from the ones that we put on hold and managed them through. So if there's a particular one, I could potentially address it.
Well, I guess I'm just looking at the engineering ones that we have listed here.
Mm-hmm.
Of those, are they all shovel-ready, or is only some of them shovel-ready now? I guess that's sort of what I'm looking at, too, as we start this discussion.
Thank you, Tamara.
I think,
And you don't have to give me individual ones
Sure.
now, but I guess I'm just looking at these and saying, you know, out of this list, are any of these shovel-ready? Are we ready to get moving ahead with these, or since they were in last year's budget and they were held out?
certainly, I can address that kind of in a macro scheme. The majority of the dollars in the engineering, and just to predicate that, most of the reconstruction projects that we do, we start designing, you know, at a minimum probably 12 months in advance, ideally 18 months in advance, because there's a number of utilities, property acquisitions, and just to make sure that the adjacent property owners don't believe that we're trying to come in there in a very short period of time and make an improvement. So if it's a major reconstruction, just in general, that's the ideal time frame, because if we're going into a particular road, one of the next ones on our horizon that's been in the plan is Marion Road. You know, when we identify that improvement, there's public infrastructure, but there's also private. And so not only do we have to budget internally to make sure that that will happen in 2012, but so does the gas company, so does the electric company, and they sometimes accelerating those large projects really can swing their budget. So I just kind of predicated that the private utilities often wait to upgrade their facilities until we actually do a reconstruction, and if we were to, that can in some cases be a pretty major swing to their budget. The other point of this list is in the engineering carry forwards, and I'm on this page, page 1. Is that where you're at?
Yes.
The majority of the dollars are in 2 projects, which is in railroad relocation, and the other is in the downtown area street and utility improvements. And so outside of that, the rest of those projects are pretty small in scope for dollars. They're either in a closeout standpoint, and so we're in punch list activities, things of that nature. So the majority of those are dollars are in 2 projects. Okay. I will say with the downtown area street and utility reconstruction that we are bidding our projects. We've got another we had significant amount of bids this last Thursday. We have the next sort of flagship bid that we have is in early April, on April 7th. That's the 57th Street bid from Louise all the way west out to T. Ellis Road. There's most of that is a surface improvement, but there is an area near Marion Road intersection where we're widening the road. That one is one we'll closely watch to see how that comes in, and then we'll continue to adjust our plan. But that's really our second big street project that we'll bid this year. And as we go forward, then the next one is 14th Street from Minnesota Avenue to Phillips Avenue. And so that would be where we would purpose those dollars on the downtown area. We're already under design for the 14th Street job. And again, we're executing many contracts right now, and we can provide an update, say, also in mid-April on basically how the spring bidding went from a user fee and also a sales tax side, and see where there may be some opportunities.
Thank you.
Anything else? Sure. Second page.
Tracy?
May I? I'm getting the impression that there might be some confusion about this list that went out. This list is the list of projects where funds were carried forward from the 2010 budget and will be added to the 2011 budget. They're not, so there will be appropriations in place as indicated on this list, and those appropriations are currently in place to spend those dollars on those particular projects that are listed. From the discussion, it didn't sound like that was clear to everyone. So
Okay.
if you were of a mind to appropriate the $3.8 million for projects, these projects already have appropriations in the amounts indicated.
Right, Tracy. I think the intention was to get these projects going sooner than later. And I think some of the misunderstanding was that these projects really aren't started, or they actually have begun, and there's still some funds left within each of those projects, but as I learned just earlier, is that they were really, truly never really funded or with the ability to bid them out. They were just started.
That may be the case in some instances, but certainly a lot of those significant projects, I mean, they add up to $4.6 million, and that's the number that I gave you last week that's carried forward into the current budget.
So 4.6 is the number. I keep thinking 3.8. Why is that?
They're two different numbers. The 4.6, those are dollars that were left in the capital fund at the end of 2010 that will now be carried forward and added to the appropriations for 2011. So though that $4.6 million is spoken for in the 2011 budget now. That's what this list totals up to, is $4.6 million.
Okay.
So those projects that were appropriated in 2010 began but didn't get completed, had dollars left over. Those dollars through this process carry forward, and that appropriation continues in effect for 2011.
If I could, Tracy, as long as you're up here. The 3.8 that was, I thought was mentioned last week when you gave your presentation, you made a comment that maybe it was an error about what the intentions were or possible use of that 3.8. Was that, could you clarify what your comment was?
Well, I certainly stand by the comments I made.
Okay.
There's $3.8 million as of the end of 2010 that remain in the capital fund, and as I indicated in my presentation, the expectation is that over the next several weeks we will be developing a financing plan for the event center. And as I stated in my presentation, it would be my intention to advocate that $3.8 million be plugged into that as part of that plan.
Okay.
Understanding that we're just beginning the capital improvement planning process for the 2012 through 2016 time period. So that's not a final decision by any means. That was a comment that I made in furtherance of the kind of the conceptual framework for a financing plan that was laid out last fall for the project. There was a $15 million cash component in the terms of the framework of the project funding that was laid out, and that was why I brought it up in that presentation, was that $3.8 million would be the first installment or the first step toward accumulating that $15 million cash component or equity contribution toward that project. And of course the benefit of that, by putting cash into the project, it minimizes or reduces the amount of borrowing that we have to do in long term. That certainly reduces the costs over the life of the project. There would be $15 million less that we're paying interest on and that we're obligating for repayment over the next 20 or 30 years. So if I had my preference, we'd put more than $15 million cash into a project of that size, simply to maintain more flexibility down the road. The less obligation, less debt we take out certainly enhances our financial flexibility and the ability to respond to other needs down the road. So it's no different than when you buy a house. The bigger the down payments you make, the lower your payments are going to be for the life of your mortgage. I guess one other comment, since I'm up here and you gave me the chance to speak, I might also mention other things that, I think it's prudent to maybe take a little time, as you mentioned, to think this through, what the best use of that $3.8 million might be. And I know from my standpoint it would certainly be much appreciated to have the benefit of a little time to put together, along with the other directors, the capital improvement plan for 2012. There's there are a lot of projects that are in need of funding. Certainly streets are high on the list for those. I don't know that you could ever come up with enough funding to fund all the street projects that any community wants to do. So that will always be an ongoing need. But this event center project is certainly going to play into the mix as we develop the 2012 capital improvement plan. One thing you may not know is that the city took bids on asphalt last week, and we got extremely favorable bids. So the money we did budget for 2011 will be able to stretch a little further and get more done with what was budgeted originally. So that's a little bit of good news as well.
Tracy, would you Would you think that using that 3.8 to pay down current debt would be a good idea, or should we wait till we incur new debt? Or to avoid incurring new debt, or would you advocate for paying current debt?
Is something I think it would be appropriate to analyze. You can't always necessarily make advance payments on bond issues. Typically, there's a call date on a bond. It's not like paying extra on your mortgage, where you can pay more almost any time you want on a mortgage. But with a bond issue, if it's appropriate and the interest rates bear that out, that you can save money, yeah. The city did that last year with or in 2010 with the entertainment tax bonds. Interest rates were favorable. It made sense, so they were in effect refinanced or paid off early.
Right.
So that would certainly be another potential use. Again, those are decisions I think that have to be thought through in the context of the planning process, the methodical process that we have to prioritize where capital dollars go.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Tracy. Mark, sorry to have you sit down, but last year, do you remember what we did with any other money that we had back in our budget, or what we've done over the years when we've wound up in the situation before? I know it's tough to bid a project, to get it all vetted out, but does it normally just go into maintenance or something, or what do we do? What have we done in the past?
Well, typically, if we turn things quickly, more maintenance-driven projects have a limited amount of design needs, and then those dollars can get executed much quicker than a full reconstruction or an expansion. So that's normally much less designs required in a maintenance activity. Okay.
And that's what we've done over the last few years? Is that what we've done?
We have. There was a time where it's been about 3 years now where there was $2 million, and at the time we were maturing the city at about 1,000 acres per year, taking agricultural land and changing it to rooftops, and so there was a push for interior reconstruction, but also expansion. And so at that point, there was $2 million set aside for expansion projects and $2 million set aside for reconstructions. But there's been, we had different challenges back then as well. We're certainly, you'll start to see us do a lot of improvements to the grid system or the mile grid, and they'll see a lot of that this year. One of the key projects is 10th and Cliff, where there was a maintenance project done, and because about 40,000 vehicles do hit that intersection every day, and now that's carried us very well to start the ultimate construction, which will happen this summer. So there's a number of different strategies that we use to try to improve the surfaces.
Councilor Rolfing.
Mark, how long do you anticipate it will be before we can see that holdback list?
Oh, the identified additional projects, I can certainly have it in a fairly short time. We are constantly looking forward, and because the fact that we design about 18 months in advance, and we also have a fairly public process on the reconstruction, but also the expansion projects, I would expect it within maybe the early part of April. I would like us to get through that time period in April where the majority of our bids are in, so we can also reconcile where our program's at for you to see how we've done just in the bidding the current project. And it's just like Tracy said, there's a number of projects we can identify. Parks can do the same. Libraries can do the same. There's priorities that exist, and that's why you have a good 5-year capital plan, so you don't only know what's static in that particular year, but you know what's coming in the next 5 years. If you take your current capital book and go to the end of engineering, there's a map in there that lays out the next 5 years of work that will be done, or that we would focus on for the reconstructions and the expansions. So much of that information you have, and I can certainly answer any of those questions as this unfolds.
But aren't we talking about here things that were taken away or not done in 2010 because of the holdbacks? And aren't, those are the things that we're talking about being identified rather than anything new and moving into 2011. So I think isn't that what we're talking about here?
Well, there's a number of strategies. For example, one is Solberg Overpass over 229. That project we've been slowly working toward to negotiate the right-of-way. The DOT has a significant part of that funding, and so do we. We had that in the plan for 2010, just with a variety of steps of where the project design was at, project right-of-way was at. We put those dollars on hold, but then we also refunded it in the 2011. So that particular holdback strategy, we've got it.
Now you've got it funded.
We've got it funded in 2011. Okay. And so, again, I would tell you that those large reconstruction projects, it would be virtually impossible for us to actually, here in April, identify it and actually get it constructed by October 15th. There's just too many steps. Just the public bidding process alone is nearly 2 months.
Understand that,
okay.
But okay.
Councilor Brown?
With that list, can you also send us the dollars intended and where the maintenance will go this year? Obviously, with the snow going now, I think that we're going to see a lot more areas that need repair, and I'd be interested in what areas we're going to be hitting this year.
Very good. Well, we have the maps and we have the lists. So, again, once we're very close to executing, as Tracy said, we did bid the asphalt last week, got extremely good bids, and so we will. Again, that just allows us inside that pooled projects of overlay to add additional maintenance. So we're already in those activities right now to add additional projects that were on our list, and we'll get some good graphics and good lists. Okay?
Okay. Any further discussion on that? Sounds like we have some plans moving forward. Thank you very much. Mark Cotter did hand out a map to all of us on the essentially the hydraulics of the levee system. The map is here for you to review. It sounds like, fortunately, the threat has not at least shown up yet, the flooding threat. So I thought it would be just important for all of us to understand just how this system works. So if you're asked questions about it, you know how it works. It's not as simple as it looks. But if you have questions, contact Mark or somebody at Public Works, and they'll be able to help you through that map. Anything else for council open discussion? Seeing none, we'll move forward with our presentations. We have an event center update from Mayor Mike Euther.
Council Chair Jamison, thank you very much for the opportunity. City Council, thanks for the opportunity. Again, in the spirit of just trying to communicate with not only you but also the public, we are trying to do the best we can to help all of you make the most responsible decision that you can when it comes to this very, very tough topic called the Event Center. Just a couple things always to remember is that, yes, we are incurring expenses, but we're incurring those expenses hopefully to do this right. Number two, we've hired professionals to do it. And they don't always come cheap, but they are professionals. And I think that we've come to a point in time after 12 years of discussion that we really do want to hear the answers versus speculating on what some of these answers may be. One of the challenges, though, is that it takes time. And it's frustrating for me, of course. I come from a business background where I want to get everything done tomorrow, but it does take time. I know that the people are anxious in the city. I know that all of you are anxious, too, to find out as much information as you can about this project. But, again, it's taking time. And then last but not least, when this is all done, folks, again, I need to reiterate, we're not always going to agree. And at some point in time, if we do come to an ultimate decision, there will be some that will not be happy with that decision. Again, just to reiterate, I'm not going to decide this, and ultimately the City Council won't decide it either. It will be the City Council. And because of that, the City Council and the public will ultimately, the City Council will try to get this thing on the ballot, but then the public will ultimately decide. And the communication on this process is the key. I wanted to touch on just a couple of things that I think we've been trying to do to help instill some confidence and to communicate with the public. The items that I've listed here in the different color, these are items that are listed not only once, but listed for ever and ever on our City Council website. And let's just go in and go through a couple of these. Number one, you folks are gracious enough to allow us these monthly informational meetings. And they're very, very informative. And then we leave them on the website for anybody to see later on. Number two, as you know, we have been having press conferences and press releases that we're sharing not only with the City Council, but also with the public as a whole. And those are also available on the website. Number three, as you know, I've tried to be as available to the public as I possibly can be. And one of the ways that I do that are through these listening and learning sessions. And as you can imagine, the one topic that comes up just about every Saturday, if not every Saturday, is this event center. And we don't screen people who can come to these listening and learning sessions. We don't. Anybody is invited. We don't screen the questions. There are some really tough questions that come, and a lot of them do involve this event center topic. And even though they're not easy, I do answer them as best I can. And so they're certainly available for all the public to see as well. In the Ask the Mayor programs that we update every month, we have been also touching on the event center, trying to give people another update on what they can expect or what has transpired over the last 30 days. And then again, if you go to that website, www.siouxfalls.org, you'll see so much information about the event center. It'll probably make your head spin a little bit. But again, it's been done in the spirit of being transparent, being open, and to try to answer some of those difficult questions that people have. But we also have other meetings. There's group meetings that have been held behind the scenes, and we're trying to do that to try to answer these questions, as well as many of you know, one-on-one meetings as well. And then last but not least, I want to make it very, very clear that this is a hot topic from the press as well. When the press calls me, or they call the department heads, and they want to talk about the event center, we don't screen them. We don't tell them, no, we don't want to answer your questions about that right now. We do it. We'll do it in my office, we'll do it at their territory, whether it's KDLT, KSFY, Kello, or yes, the Argus Leader. We'll certainly do that, again, trying to be open and trying to be transparent. And of course, you good folks are also playing your role, and it's a critical role. I can't do this alone. The department heads can't do this alone, and even these professionals that we've hired can't do it alone either. You folks certainly are playing an active role in this, and I commend you. We need you now, and we're going to need you well on into the future. And two, I wanted to certainly let you good folks know that if there's any public meetings that you would like to have on your own, I'd urge you to do so. You have access to the public at an even different level than I do. If there are forums, if there are public meetings that you believe that should be held and you would like to lead those or chair those, I'd highly urge you to do that, and I would encourage you to do that as well. One of the interesting things, though, is I will tell you, if there are lessons learned, at least that I've learned, is that when you do have these open meetings or these open forums with the public, here's something that I've learned. I'll tell you, they are not nearly as fruitful unless you have the facts. And that's why I'm pushing these professionals as much as we possibly can to get us those facts as fast as we possibly can. Because the people of Sioux Falls and the people of South Dakota, they're not dumb. They want to know. They're hungry. They got an insatiable appetite to learn and to be part of this process. But they do want the facts. And there are many times in the listening and learning sessions or on one-on-ones where I have to flat out tell them, I don't know the answer yet, but I'm working hard to try to find those answers. So that's a lesson for you if you do have those meetings with the public. Number two, again, You think you've got all the answers or all the questions, but there's still another one out there. And they're going to ask you for more. But here's, and again, this is my impression, but I think I do have a pretty good pulse on the public. I think the people of Sioux Falls are really, they do support the process. They are really pleased with how open we've been. And I will tell you, I know that they are encouraged by the progress that the City Council and the rest of the team is making. As Councilor Brown has reiterated time and time again, and I've agreed with them every time, the hot topic is the money. It's the money. And I want to talk about this more and more, and we're going to need to before we're ever going to take it to a vote of the people of Sioux Falls. You know, folks, again, how are we going to pay for it? How are we going to build it? And then once we build it, or if we build it, you know, how do we pay to operate it? But one of the things that I think that we're going to prove is that we can do this prudently. We can maximize taxpayer dollars. And as many of us expect, we're not building it for today. We want to build it for generations to come, and we want to do it right the first time. Also, you know, we also need to understand that, yes, there's expenses involved, but folks, there are returns on this investment. Some of them you can see, others you can't see. But we will need to understand there are going to be economic benefits with this investment. And then the one thing, too, is that if we do build this event center, we're still going to meet the other needs of city government as well and meet those community priorities. I had a pretty high-profile individual come up to me last week and said this to me, and I thought I'd share it with you today. He said, "It is unrealistic to build a new event center for Sioux Falls without sacrifice somewhere else." I'm not going to lie to you folks. It's a $100 million investment, at least. So with a project of that magnitude, we are going to have to sacrifice somewhere else if we decide to do it. Flat out. Flat out. No ifs, ands, or buts. We're going to have to make tough choices. You know, as Tracy Turback said, you know what? You can use cash to pay for this thing, or you can borrow to pay for this thing. But a choice is that if you pay cash, that's less interest expense that you pay. If you borrow more, ultimately it's going to cost you more, but then maybe you can use that money for some other purpose. There are priorities that we're going to have to make. There are tough choices that we're going to have to make. And then I thought this individual hit it right on the nail. He said if it was that easy, it would have been built a long time ago. There was an article in the Argus Leader this weekend, and it touched on kind of a timeline of events involving this event center discussion. There was one bullet, I don't know if you all saw it, but I tell you, it just nailed me right smack dab on the head. In the year 2001, they had a discussion about building a 12,000-seat event center for our city. In 2001, they hired a professional from Minneapolis to estimate the expense. 9 years ago, it was $60 million, and that included a little rec center as well. 9 years later, the expense now to build that 12,000-seat event center is $100 million at least. Choices will be made if we're going to do this. They have to, and they're not easy. Priorities will need to be evaluated. They have to. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fun. We're going to disagree occasionally. And those short-term nice-to-haves, they are going to conflict with these longer-term, bigger investments that our city needs to make. But I tell you, I have faith in you folks. And the city of Sioux Falls has faith in you folks. And I don't know if they have faith in me, but I'm going to plod along anyway. And ultimately, I think we'll find that effective public servants will find a way to do both. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm now going to hand it off to the professionals that the city of Sioux Falls has hired to do this work.
Good afternoon again. City Council, Mark Cotter with the Office of Public Works. I've become the schedule slide person for this project, so I will again articulate through as we started the selection of the architect back in October. We've started to move off some of those key milestones that we've met to this point. But on February 24th, the most suitable and feasible downtown site was selected, and then that kicks off now comparing that most suitable site to the Arena Convention Center site. And the day after that began, St. Combs and Coke Hazard, along with Mortensen, really started that detailed discussion. Our schedule as it stands today is we'd like to have that analysis and a final report ready the week of April 18th. And so that's what we're targeting. We have not nailed down schedules, anything to that sense, but we wanted to give you a point in time in April of when we hope to actually have that final report done. All right, now we're going to bring up Don Deflis, and he's with St. Combs, as you've met him before. We're going to do a recap of how we reached the most suitable and feasible site of downtown. And so for some of you, you've seen this, but this was really predicated off Councilman Aguilar's comment about the level of exhibits, the analysis that goes in to find that site, and now you'll also see tonight some of those same exhibits that reference the Arena Convention Center site. So with that, I'll bring up Don Deflis.
Thanks, Mark. What we wanted to do is take you through that analysis, as Mark said, but also tell you what we're working on and introduce some new exhibits about the parking at the convention center tonight, which we're unveiling for the first time. And then talk about where we are planning to locate the building on both sites so people understand that and you can inform the public. Also, we've been working very closely with the construction manager on that, the cost model, which is a real crucial element of this as well. So that's what we've been working on. So basically what we did on the downtown site is we had looked at this 5 years ago, but obviously conditions have changed in the 5 years. Back downtown when we looked at the site before downtown, the Sharapa site was the zip feed site. The conditions have changed, traffic has changed, parking has changed. So what we did is we zoomed out and looked and started saying what are all the possible downtown sites and start looking at them as well as their feasibility. We started to look at the traffic because it's really important to understand for an event center the traffic, because basically everyone arrives within approximately the last hour, and then after an event everyone wants to get out very quickly. So in order to have a successful event center you need to understand traffic. With the downtown traffic, again, we are the city as we're looking at updating the traffic plans, and that'll be also part of this upcoming phase. But looking in, coming from the east on 10th and 11th and as well as from the west, Minnesota has good access from the north and south, and then more on a minor road, neighborhood collector roads, we've also got 6th and 8th. And generally the conclusion was 5 years ago, and we don't believe this has changed at all, that downtown with its grid has good traffic access. The real perception from people is that it may actually be worse than it is. If you go downtown, and part of it's the timing of the lights, if you have to sit and wait for a light, you may be a little frustrated about that, but just looking at the number of lanes downtown, it should work traffic-wise. The same was really the sense of the convention center site as well. Then what we did is we zoomed out again, and what this graphic shows is we looked at every reasonable parking space downtown. So what this is showing you is the brighter yellow are the public parking garages. Then we have public parking surface lots, and then we also have private garages and private lots. And then in addition to this, we also add all the on-street parking. So we did numerous counts of this to try to be more accurate than was done 5 years ago, because I will tell you we were involved in that. It was a slightly more superficial look at it that time, was it downtown or the convention center. So we really wanted to get accurate counts. We reviewed the Walker parking study. We went with city. We did drive-bys to see what's available. So on the site, what we started to do is say what sites are available. We originally came up with approximately 8 to 9 sites we could look at downtown, and some of them, quite honestly, were not suitable, or they were not readily available, or we'd not have to knock down some of the biggest buildings in town in order to fit them, so they didn't seem to be reasonable. But we quickly went in and we said there were 5 reasonable sites that we thought were doable. They are, if you look at the map, is site number 1, and again, it's going to be difficult to point in this room. We've got site number 1 on this screen here, which is the Sharapa site, formerly known as the Zip Feed site, which was the recommended site 5 years ago right here. We have site number 2, which was the Sioux Steel site. We had site number 3, which we're calling the Railroad site, which is south of the Sharapa site on the other side of 8th. We also looked at the post office site. And we also looked at the 300 block of Dakota. Those sites were not as readily available. We thought in that one case, we might have to condemn land on the 300 block of Dakota, and if not, also, there is a current designated park right there that would have to be vacated, and we think that's against city rules. The post office site is going back into use, so it's not readily available. We did do initial ratings on that, and even if the post office came to you tomorrow and said, we want to unload this site and sell it, it still did not have as high ratings as the final choice. So we looked at that very quickly to say, how could this work? What are the reasonable sites? So at the end of the day, it came down to the 3 most logical sites. But in any case, when we looked at all of the sites, here's the criteria we came up with. We wanted to talk about availability and timing. If the site isn't available, it's not going to be done. Available parking, that is one of the crucial issues to making this work. Is the properties, are they available for acquisition, and what is their cost to buy them? For a lot of the downtown sites, or virtually all of them, you have to buy property. Additional parking needs, so if we don't have enough parking, and where is it? How do we add it, and at what cost? The site size, location. Basically, if it just didn't fit an event center, we didn't even count it. So these are all relative. You could fit an event center, but some of them would do it better than others. Available infrastructure, water, sanitary, sewer, storm. Basically, all the downtown sites work on that. You've got a lot of good utilities downtown. Building costs for each site. Some costs might require a more expensive building on that site in addition to the land cost. Site opportunities and challenges, that's how close you are to retail, those kind of things. Ability to share amenities and spaces also. If you're next to a parking garage or next to retail, that's a plus. Neighborhood compatibility. If you have a huge tall arena, and this will be the biggest structure if it's downtown or at the convention center, how good of a neighbor is that? If you're next to large commercial properties, that's really good. If you're looming over a one-story residential house, not as good. So that we needed to factor in. And finally, the last one is maybe a little more subjective, but site exposure and image and how it reflects on either downtown, and we'll look at the same thing at the convention center. So those were our ratings, and then we looked at Sharapa, Sioux Steel, and the rail lines, and we gave them both, so you'll have the rating and priority weight, and then we also gave it a numerical value so we could add it up. And in order to also make it clear, we gave it a traffic light system. Green means go, there's no problems, it all works. Yellow means caution, start to slow down. Red means you have some major issues. So whether people like a numerical or a visual, we tried to put them both together. And basically, quite honestly, I was not sure at the beginning of this. We had studied Sharapa 5 years ago. Conditions have changed. Would that still be the best site? And our conclusion was, yes, it was. It's readily available. You have at least what appears to be a willing owner, has been in the past, very community-oriented. Some of the concerns were, again, you've got to buy 2 or 3 properties. Also, the relationship of the tracks, that was one concern. So one of the things we did is we stepped back and said, can we build an event center and not have to take the tracks in order to put it at the Sharapa site? And the answer is yes. So that took us a while to study that. When we did it 5 years ago, the whole arena event center was over the tracks. We do not believe the tracks will necessarily be totally available when this building is open, and so we've tried to make an assumption that can this proceed without those, and the answer is yes. If the answer to that had been no, the Sharapa would have had far lower ratings. That is probably the biggest negative about the rail lines site. You basically cannot build there until the rail lines are all removed, and then you can start. The Sioux Falls site is a great site for certain things, but what they told the city is they don't really want to clear out yet. Maybe long term they do, but you have a large site you'd have to purchase. They have a going business there that has a very important economic impact. So I think long term that site is going to be available. It's less available in the short term, especially as compared to the Sharapa site. So overall, we gave the Sharapa a 75 out of 100. Again, probably if the rail lines would be immediately available for surface parking, it'd be a little higher than that, and that's what the assumption was 5 years ago. We had assumed that that site would be available, the tracks would be available. It makes it a little better, but it is still very doable without that. So that was the conclusion. And again, what we wanted to show you is people go, well, how did you come up with the parking ratings? What we did as compared to 5 years ago is we took a walking distance from the front door, 1,600 feet. That is the equivalent of 4 blocks, 4 linear blocks, like north to south in Sioux Falls. So it's a 4-block walking distance from the front door, and we did not do it this time as the crow flies. 5 years ago, it was done as the crow flies, but in reality, you walk in a pattern downtown of you walk up and down the blocks and you step at the lights. So that's very important. The blue line in your diagram is 1,600 feet. The dotted red line is 2,000 feet. And so what you can see in the Sharapa site is you start to get a lot of parking around, particularly to the west, but a lot of it is on the edge. There's a big increase of parking when you go from 4 blocks or 1,600 feet up to 2,000 feet. And the weird shape is because of the river starts to cut off some of the parking to the north. But still, of all the downtown sites, this probably had the best parking totals, and that helped it rise to the top. Whereas when we go look at the Sioux Steel site, for all of its value in certain things, it's towards the north end of downtown. A lot of the access is cut off by the river, and it has far less parking available. So in addition to its availability and the fact that it is a strong growing business or going business on it, it also has far less parking availability. And if we would do a detailed traffic study, this would probably also have the worst traffic access, because unlike normal traffic for commercial uses, everyone comes to the arena at the end. So this site we thought was more suited to future development for mixed-use commercial retail. And then finally, the rail line site had decent parking, but the killer on this site again was it is not even possibly available till you get the rail deal done, move all the rail lines, and then move on. So that's what we came up with, and we said basically that at the end of this, we do believe the Sharapa site has a lot going for it. It is the most suitable and feasible downtown site immediately available. There's a few issues we need to study on it and continuing, and one of which is, in addition to the existing parking supply, where does new additional parking come from? What we've said is our analysis points out that we need additional parking, whether it is a downtown site or whether it is a convention site. So the question is, where does that go, how is it done, and how much does it cost? And that's what we are analyzing it. The one other thing is I didn't mention on the criteria that we did for the priority ratings. If you look at that, when we've done those in the past, often we have economic factors built into that, but you as the city have hired a whole separate economic study, so that's a whole nother set of information you're going to have, and then we're going to come up with ratings for both sites and well as capital costs for both sites, comparing the convention to the Sharapa downtown. And now what we did is we have taken the same method of analyzing the downtown site, and we have done it at the convention center, where again we're taking the 1,600-foot walking distance from a front door to any of the parking lots, and then the dotted line again is 2,000. So basically what this points out is there is significantly more parking existing at the convention center. However, what we acknowledge is the convention center has a lot of uses, and so there will be probably a number of conflicts, and we're still doing that analysis. So what we've determined, as we said, because of that, if you just looked at this diagram, you would not have to add any parking to the convention center. But Howard Wood is there, the baseball stadium is there, and the convention center is there. So you need to add parking. So what we've looked at is this next diagram takes a lot. This diagram may be the most doable for parking, and what it does is it eliminates 5 of the baseball fields and adds a surface lot, which would be relatively cost effective to add 800 spaces at this site. And so we're still analyzing, is that the ultimate total we need? We think it's a good location. It's within the 1,600 feet. Is that acceptable? So what we're doing is looking at every possible parking option. There's 2 or 3 or 4 scenarios we are looking at the convention center site, and there's probably 4 or 5 or 6 we're looking at the Sharapa site to say how can we add parking to make it work for a 12,000 seat arena. And again, that's what we're trying to do, is the maximum load. This building, in order to be financially doable, has to have enough parking to host the event so people come, have a positive experience, and remember, it is the last thing in their memory as they're getting out in the traffic and in the parking. So it's their last memory of the evening, and it has to be a very positive experience. But that's where we are right now. We're going through the criteria. We're doing analysis. One other thing I want to point out is if you look at this diagram, and I don't know if this has always been clear to people, because again, some people said put it where Howard Wood Field is. We are proposing to attach the building to the southwest side. If this is the existing arena, we've got the convention center, and it would be attached to the convention center here. At the Sharapa site, it would be pretty much on the surface lot, and it would be attached to the Sharapa building. They would actually touch. And we need to do that in order to fit it within the Sharapa, the envelope we have, the site envelope of within the Sharapa building on the west and the rail lines on the east, so we don't touch the rail lines. So that's where we are going to propose in either case that they go. This one would be attached at the convention center level. In both cases, because of both water and rock, we would put the event level of the building, which would be where the basketball court is, the ice, or the convention floor, at grade level. So if you come into this building and would go up to the main concourse, you would take escalators up to the main concourse in either site. So the sites in terms of building design are going to be very comparable. We're going to run the numbers on those, but it's probably the big difference will be off-site cost, and that's particularly parking. So that'll be the big difference capital-wise cost between the two sites, and then you will be able to compare that with our ratings with the separate economic study that is being done, and we're running the costs both on-site and off-site with Mortensen to make sure they are very right on for what we need to project for this building. And then we're going to go through, I think, continue on with Mortensen and the economics description, and if we need to answer questions after, we'll be happy to do so.
Thank you, Don. All right, one of the strategies that we did when we started to hire the professionals is we also hired the construction manager at risk at the beginning of this process so that they can be involved from the very beginning. They've got a very active role in the comparative analysis, and we'll bring up Dan Mells with Mortensen, and he'll take you through what role that they've played to make sure that as this analysis is going, that they have some very good relevant information for the team. Dan?
Thanks, Mark. Good evening, everybody. Real briefly, I'll just give you an update on what we've been doing to support the team. First of all, we're going to get a better picture of me. I hate that picture. Anyway, we have started putting together some cost modeling for the building itself so that we can establish a budget for the building and then start having qualitative discussions about the different components of the building, and that discussion will start tomorrow. We've also put together a master project schedule that carries us all the way through the end of construction so that we've started tying timelines to all the different activities that we need to do here during Phase 1 and Phase 2, and then ultimately during Phase 3, which would be the construction process. We've supported the site comparisons that Don has reported there and doing cost estimates of the different sites and the utilities associated with the different sites and trenching through rock and everything that goes along with looking at the different sites. We've started our process of meeting with subcontractors in the community, understanding their capacities and capabilities and interest in the projects, and that's twofold. One, to better understand what portions of the building they can build, and secondly, to gain their support of the project as a whole as we work towards a vote here in November. And we're providing some high-level information to the economic impact study that's being put together. I've got a few of those statistics for you now. Right now, we anticipate this project will create 600,000 man-hours of work on site, or 600,000 craft work hours on site. That it'll create, over the course of the construction project, 1,100 craft jobs. That will have a peak workforce of about 275 workers. And then there are also off-site jobs that will be created as a result of this project, off-site being fabrication, deliveries, professional staff such as design, architects, engineers, and so forth. And that'll be another 1,400 jobs. So 1,100 jobs on-site, 1,400 jobs off-site, for a total of about 2,500 jobs that will be created by the project. Today we got started with some goal setting. We had a goal setting session today and worked through developing all the different goals that we need to accomplish for the project. And one of the discussions we had today as well is escalation and the cost of money. And right now, the budget's established based on starting construction in 2012. But if you start to look at cost escalation and what that really means, in 2011, we anticipate that the cost escalation will be about 4%. But in 2012, it's projected to be as high as 6%. So construction cost escalation is accelerating at a higher rate than traditional cost of living. So this is a good time to go to market with the economy where it's at right now and the need for jobs. We really encourage that this project stay on task for a vote in November of this year so that we can get going to market next year and not face construction cost escalation. Even like a 6-month delivery or a 6-month delay on going to vote could result in about 2 to 3% escalation. 2 to 3% on $100 million is $2 to $3 million. So it's important that we keep the momentum going. And what I'm seeing too now on the project is that now that the team has been established, the momentum is increasing exponentially, and the amount of information that's going to come out now here in over the next few months as a result of all the work that the design team is doing is going to be significantly more than what you've seen before. So this is the time to really be collecting the information and understanding the information as we move towards a November vote. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mike Cooper, Planning and Building Services. What I would like to do quickly is introduce the third component of our consulting team. As everybody recalls, the City Council authorized us to proceed in hiring a consultant to perform an economic and development impact analysis for this event center project. And when we put together the timeline, we indicated that we would do that over a period of approximately 60 days with the goal of having a report to you by mid-April. And so again, as Mark Cotter alluded to earlier, we are now targeting this report along with the site development analysis by the AE firm to be finalized during this week of April 18th. And as Mark said, we're still putting together the specifics of when that will be presented and when it will be completed. So today, it's my pleasure to introduce to the community David Stone, who is a project manager with AECom, and he's going to be responsible for putting together a very key part of this entire package, which is the economic and development impact analysis. David, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mike. A few of the previous speakers have already done a pretty good job of introducing what our work is, so I'll be fairly brief. And I'm sure by now most of you know that what our job is to do is to essentially analyze and quantify as much as possible all the different effects that the construction and the operation of the facility would have at the two identified sites. That includes everything from the construction project itself, not only in terms of the quantitative aspects that were just talked about, to some of the just other kind of broader effects that it may have on the immediate area, and then looking into the operations, what kinds of spending would be attracted based on the usage of the facility at the two sites. And again, how they would compare from site to site. Some of our major tasks are listed above. We're working. One of the reasons I'm here in town this week is to meet with SMG and Global Spectrum to really get a better sense of what we think the usage of the facility would be at both sites, so we can start to quantify what those impacts would be. We're also looking around the country, regionally as much as possible, at facilities built in comparable markets, both in downtown and non-downtown locations, to see what kind of effects and impacts they've had on their communities and their immediate areas. We're also looking at some kind of, again, as a kind of broader, more qualitative impacts that could accrue to communities based on this type of facility developments. We're also kind of last, what I would consider to be the major piece of what we're looking at is what the kind of spin-off economic development benefits may be from either site. So what types of other economic development the operation of this facility could lead to at both sites. Those are essentially our main tasks, and I'm here afterwards to answer any questions there may be. Thanks.
Again, you folks of the City Council and of course the people of Sioux Falls are intrigued again by this investment that we're making in these professionals. I want to let you know this is a slide that has not changed. We are still going to spend that $500,000 on these professionals, and they're doing their work now. And as you also know, and as we've talked about, there are some additional potential expenses that we do expect we will incur at some point in time, whether it's traveling to other locations to evaluate what they've done there, or of course, as we've talked about, naming rights and that market analysis as well. We are planning a public open house tomorrow from 5 to 7. We'd like to invite anybody from the public to go meet with these professionals that we've hired. I know that the people of Sioux Falls have some unanswered questions. Now, whether they'll be able to answer them tomorrow, I don't know, but at least you'll have access to these people, and they're more than willing to try to answer any questions that they may have as well. And two, I wanted to let you folks know of the City Council something. About 45 minutes to an hour ago, I actually met with these professionals, and I said, hey, would you be willing to meet with the City Council before that mid-April date again? And they said wholeheartedly yes. Whether you wanted to do that on a one-on-one basis, on with 2 of you, they'll do it. With 3 of you, they'll do it. Or they're willing to do it with all 8 of you again. I know that you folks also have an insatiable demand to know more. You're getting people asking you questions that you can't answer. If you want to take maybe the next 7 days to 14 days and come up with all those questions that you've had or that you still may get over the next couple of weeks, let's bring these folks back in. We can do it at any site that you'd like. We can do it right here if you want with all 8 of you, or we can do it at another location if you'd like, so that you can allow more of the public to attend that meeting. Or if you want to meet one-on-one or 2-on-2, they'll do that too. Again, we're trying, folks. We really are. We don't want to hide anything from you. It's just that we don't have all the answers as fast as we want them. So we thought these men and women of they's professional firms, they'll be willing to come in. Councilor Chair Jameson, with your permission, I'll work with you and of course with Vice Chair Aguilar to find that suitable date, and then we'll go from there. But the people of Sioux Falls, these folks will be at your beck and call to try to answer those questions. Again, the April 18th is when we believe that these women and men will come back to give a final report of their work. Again, now we'll insert another potential meeting that we just talked about, so I would say that will be in early April. So we'll throw that in there as well. And then just to summarize again, folks, the progress is continuing. As I tell you, they are hard at work. We're doing all this comparative analysis that people have asked for. We are getting smarter. We definitely are. We're trying to work to keep you informed along the way. We're following through with the things that we said we'd do. And I know that people know that we've been as fair and professional and constructive, and all of Sioux Falls and all the city councilors and all those people that are so anxious to make this thing happen. I know the process seems slow, but please, just hang in there. Again, City Council, thank you for the opportunity to engage you today in this process, and we are certainly available for any questions or comments that you may have. Councilor Chairman Jameson, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor. Questions? Councilor Rolfing.
Yes. Turn this on. I believe this would be for you. One question I had on your slide, this big one with the where it had
the ratings. Yep.
Right. When you took the Sharapa place,
Yes.
how does the 75 compare with a overview of other event centers, plopping them down in different areas of
Not actually bad. And actually what we did is after this, again, because we took the economic criteria,
Right.
Mike Harvey, my partner, and I sat down and we went, okay, let's compare our old sites with our old arenas, and let's just do this exact same exercise with these. A lot of them were in this range. Again, we're pretty critical because there's very few perfect sites. The one that always comes to the top for us is Winnipeg, because we had a downtown. We helped renew downtown. We had to build no parking. But as I said last time, I think, or at the last meeting, a lot of sites will go start to do an arena, and instead of adding 500 to 800 spots or 1,000 spots, we're starting from scratch, and we suddenly have to build 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 spots. So those kind of sites have far less ratings. So we're trying to do this on a comparative basis. But the 75 isn't bad. I mean, I would still put that when you see the number of greens. It's positive. I mean, I think the biggest negative is we think the traffic will work. The biggest negative of that site, probably, quite honestly, previewing it compared to the convention center site, is you have to build parking at both, but there are more locations at the convention center to build surface parking than there probably are downtown, because downtown is built up. So parking downtown generally costs more to add, and obviously if you're buying land downtown, you are buying it. You don't have the land like the convention center. So predicting those, I mean, those are the big things. But I think a 75, like people may say, oh, that's a C grading. We're just pretty tough on these, so I would call it a good grading. It's not awesome because there are some complications because of the rails. And again, probably 5 years ago, using these same ratings, that site would have been a little higher, quite honestly, because we assumed the zip feed was going. We assumed we'd be able to put the arena, then build the parking. We'd get the rail lines, and some of those assumptions are gone within this time frame. It's gotten a little worse from that viewpoint. Not to say it can't be done. We said 5 years ago, and we still believe those are both decent sites. One is going to rise to the top, but it works. It's a 75 is not a bad rating. It's not something horrible.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
Councilor Brown.
Don, I have another question in regards to parking.
Yep.
Was any consideration given to the pedestrian-friendly nature of the parking? Because the convention center site, you'd have to cross Western according to your drawings,
Yep.
Russell, West. Those are major streets.
Yeah, although if you look at it again, and that's one we changed the downtown site and the convention center from the crow flies. In the old days, like some of the previous diagrams for both downtown and convention center, like they showed a lot more parking across Russell, you would have to run across the street and risk your life to be with 1,600 feet. So we took that away. I mean, that's a little, again, the crow fly theory just doesn't work when you're a pedestrian. So again, I think people can argue, and there's been lots of discussions with lots of different people, allow me to tell you that. So there could be an argument. You may have some people who come and say, I don't think it works in Sioux Falls in the middle of the winter to walk 5 blocks and have a comfortable experience, whether it's downtown or the convention center. At 70 degrees, fine, no problem. But at 0, not so good. So we have, and again, that is a qualitative, we've done the quantity and the distance, and everyone here has to decide does all the parking have to be within 3 blocks, within 4 blocks, 5 blocks? That's a decision I think everyone needs to make. It's not our decision to make. There's been many, many places downtown that have longer parking distances, but again, you are a cold northern climate in the winter, and you need to acknowledge that, and how far are people willing to walk in either site? And again, part of it is the convention center site. If you think about it, people can walk diagonally through a parking lot. You know, it's pretty efficient in a big open parking lot to walk diagonally. Not so much you can't do that downtown. You have to get out of your parking lot, walk along the street. There's some open lots you can walk through diagonally. So we've tried to acknowledge that if there's straightaway paths. But I think that's just a qualitative thing. Do you want to walk 4 or 5 blocks? And how many people per car? We've done a lot of analysis. This has got to work, you know, for the big concerts as well as the 8,000 crowds, which is what your sporting teams are going to be, probably max. So it's just the bigger events that are going to have 12,000. So you could argue downtown is a friendlier walk. Some people may disagree. That's not our decision to make, but you got to cross a river, you got to cross bridges. Some parts of downtown are a nice friendly walk, other parts are less friendly.
Councilor Erpenbach.
A couple of questions get back to the chart that Rex was talking about. Is there a chart like this for the arena site?
We are just starting it, and part of it is the reason we haven't completed it is, again, I really, because once everyone sees the numbers, there's the numbers. We really want to make a sense. The big issue, I think, at the convention center site, well, if no one minds putting additional parking on the fields, that's one. So we are assuming that is the most cost-effective way to add parking at that site for the city. 5 years ago, when we looked at it, there was a discussion of buying a lot of properties to the west that would take condemnation, and seems like a really horrible idea. So this is why we went to this one. So we're looking at the convention center ratings. The biggest deal that is, you know, I think we're almost there, but and probably if we come back before the 18th, we'll obviously have those ratings. The real big deal on the convention center is what are the conflicts, and is that positive? Is that negative? I mean, how many, you know, quite honestly, in the business, for arenas, the big concerts are going to be 12,000. They don't tour too much inside buildings in the summer. So the baseball is less of a conflict. It's the Howard Wood we're really looking at. How many events does that knock out? What are the parking conflicts? And so we need to do that analysis before we come up with our final ratings with the convention center. Part of it is we may just add more parking, in which case we overcome that, and it may affect the ratings or just affect the cost.
Will those ratings then show us the difference, give us a number for the arena site without the McCart Fields being paved?
No, I don't. Our conclusion already is if you don't add parking, you should not build a 12,000-seat arena there. That I can tell you right now.
And your only solution for adding parking there at this point in terms of cost effectiveness is to pave green space, correct?
There's 2 or 3 choices. One is pave green space. The 5 fields are the closest. The other is to take the spaces south of the fields, which I believe is the Moose Lodge, but that wouldn't give you a lot of spaces. The next option would be to buy up a bunch of residential land or commercial nearby and level those and build parking, which it seems like an expensive and a neighborhood unfriendly idea. And the final one would be to build structured parking, which is 10 times the cost of surface parking. Those are your kind of big choices for that site.
One other question then regarding parking. Can you, obviously you've built put the Sharapa in that location with the rail tracks still there.
Yes.
It's our hope and our dream and our wish that those tracks are gone. Can you look at that site without those tracks and tell us how many more parking spots would be at that
Yes,
site?
we've done that already, and now we just need to redo it again. It's approximately, I think it's 800, depending on how far we go. If we go really far to the south, it's probably almost 1,200. Because again, compared to 5 years ago, we have shrunk the building floor plate, and we've made it more vertical, and that's a long discussion, but it's just what we've tried to do is to make it work on virtually any of the downtown sites we investigated. We'll shrink the floor plate, but have the same amount of seats. So it becomes a more vertical building. We're adding a third concourse, similar amount of square footage that we did 5 years ago, but just a different scheme. Because otherwise, none of the downtown sites were going to work. And it would have looked like a predestined thing that somehow we wanted it at the convention center, and we said we would be objective. So we will look at those, and it will be better to have either development or parking there. But our thought is, again, a building gets a reputation on opening day, so it has to have the right amount of parking and right access from the beginning. Otherwise, it gets a black eye, and we can't come back and say, oh, we missed it by a year. And so if you add that parking in the future, we're saying we need to come up with a scenario from day one that works, and then that's just nice to have. Whether it's more parking, whether it's more parking with friendly development, either would make the site better still.
One more question that just came to mind. And maybe you've explained that already and I've just missed it, but are the plans for the 3-story and the smaller footprint, are those in both locations?
Both locations.
We're
We're
talking
almost,
apples to apples.
because it's unique. Usually when you're doing two different sites, they have a lot of different conditions. But because you have either water close to your surface, like downtown, or rock really close to the surface at the convention center, 2 to 4 feet down the court site, we want to put the event level right at grade. So that makes the buildings very similar. If you also look at it, you're in a cold northern climate in the winter, so we want to have multiple entries so people can get into the building quickly. It's almost like the buildings are being pivoted. They'll have different lobbies slightly, but they'll have similar overall relationship. The one big difference is the convention center arena. Basically, you can combine the arena floor, if we do it correctly, with the convention center floor, so you have the option in that site of getting more contiguous trade show space, and David will put that in the analysis, and that may either be a great thing or be not a great thing. I mean, it may not have a huge financial impact, or it may. That's up to him. But by putting it out there, we would have that option. But otherwise, they're going to be pretty similar. The general condition and what we're going to propose, just so everyone understands, is multi-concourses, the suites at the right above the mid-concourse at its own private level. And what that allows you to do in either case is because you have sports teams that are not going to sell out 12,000 seats. You don't want the suites at the top of this bowl. We have to make sure this arena works for your big events, and it also works for your small events. The 4,000 to 8,000, so it doesn't look like a half-empty building, because then it will be a failure. So that's why we've gone to this 3 concourse concept, and we think that generally pulls the building in, gets you more parking on the site, either site, but it will be very functional, cost-effective, and get you a better building. So both sites are similar. Sorry if I'm too long-winded.
No, that's good. I needed to hear that. Thank you.
Okay.
Councilor Anderson.
A couple quick questions. At the downtown site, we keep talking about the tracks and how we're going to fit that in there. What's going to be the distance between the tracks and the building if we do build it down there?
Are we 50? Yeah, we're like 40 to 50. So what we're doing is, like on our diagram there, when you look up, we have a square rectilinear building. In reality, at the Sharapa site, we're not going to do a square building. The northeast corner needs to be eased away to keep it away from the tracks, just so everyone. So if you see this diagram and go, well, you built it over the tracks, the final design is not going to be that shape. It's going to be curved or eased, so we cannot build it over the tracks. They've got a lot of requirements, how far, it's the railroad after all, how far you have to be from the tracks, all of their requirements, so we'll meet all of those. And we're also talking, just so you understand on that one, it's probably going to move a little more to the north, and the loading will be tucked away on the south side in that site, so you won't see a lot of the loading. These buildings have very large loading functions, and you want to hide them as much as possible. So in that one, we'd be locating the loading on the south side side, hidden behind a southwest lobby. So this would have a major southwest lobby and a major northwest lobby to get you to 6th and 8th and close to the downtown parking is the general idea going in. So when we come back, you'll know what we're not surprised what we're about to propose.
Also, when you made this presentation, I believe one of the things you talked about was activities at event centers. When event centers are busy, when they're not.
Yeah.
Could you?
Yeah, I didn't go through a lot of that explanation tonight. But basically, when we look at access and parking, this has all been based on a sold-out event, which is the worst case for parking and access, at approximately 7 o'clock at night. The reason that is important, you still have the residual after rush hour, but it started to calm down. There's very few major concerts that ever would start right during rush hour at 5:30 or 6. It just doesn't happen because people happen to work to those hours. So that's the real key. Then the other thing we usually look at is there's something unusual that takes a weekend matinee and make it worse. But in this case, no. I mean, downtown, there's less traffic on the weekends, convention center, no big deal. So that's our peak load, and that's kind of what you have to look at. And then again, afterwards, say it's 9 to 10 at night, there's very little background traffic at then, but the difference then is everyone wants to leave almost immediately. You know, the game's over, I want to go home, get the babysitter, the whole deal, I got to get out of here. And so you've got to look at the traffic from that aspect, that everyone wants to get out instantly, and how do the roads around it and the parking lots work for that scenario.
Yeah, but also you talked about seasonal.
Yeah, seasonal. So the key peak season for an arena is fall, winter, and spring. So not only for your anchor tenants, but also for traveling concerts. Again, there are some concert summer acts that will go from an amphitheater to an indoor building to an amphitheater, but they are rare. A lot of big rock groups, country groups, pop groups are set up of doing, they call them the shed tours, the amphitheaters. So they're only set up to do outside festivals, amphitheaters, and they don't want to come into a building in the summer. So uniformly, nothing to do with Sioux Falls. Around the business, the slow season is the summer season for indoor arenas, which is why we're less worried about any conflict from baseball. It's not that big of a conflict. So that's generally how the business works. And then what we also have to analyze at the convention center is when are you getting your trade shows and conventions to make sure that doesn't conflict with the arena there. So that's why we don't have the final analysis. We are doing those ratings. But it's doable. And so what we've said is if that was the only building out there, you don't need any parking, but you need extra parking because of that.
Thank you.
Councilor Entman.
Don, you will, when you come back the next time, you will identify what the cost of the additional parking will be?
Yes, so that's what we're doing right now. We've come up, as I said, five or six different schemes downtown. Just drew them up, given them to Mortensen, saying, here's logic. And I will tell you, some are surface lots, so it's not all, we were worried they were all going to have to be structure. So some are surface lots, some are structure. We're going to cost those, and some are expensive per space, more expensive per structure because they're just more complicated. We have some at the arena site, so there's on-site parking, and some off-site.
And also property acquisition, will you be able to give us a rough idea what that could cost to?
Yes, I think we are going to have that by then. We're having, certainly on Sharapa, meetings with that. And again, I think he was quoted in the newspapers that said the deal was still good. But so there's I believe there are two properties that have to be purchased at Sharapa in order to make it work between the rail tracks.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Aguilar.
My question is for David. You gave us a summary of key activities as far as what you've done. I'm sure that the parameters have been developed for the study. What can you tell us that in the end your report will tell us?
Kind of in the big picture, what we'll be doing is, again, presenting what I consider a handful of different types of impacts. So the biggest and first piece will be comparing very quantitatively economic impacts from the operation of the facility at both sites. So that entails assumptions based on the usage of the facility at both sites, number of events, attendance, revenues, expenses, et cetera, and what that translates into spending locally outside of the facility. and I would anticipate there'd be some differences based on just the characteristics of different types of events. As Don said, we may be able to pick up some more convention trade show events out at the convention center site because of the addition of more contiguous flat floor space. I don't have the answer to that yet, but that's possible. So that's just a possible example of one difference between the two sites. So we'll have, essentially, I see a table comparing all of these differences, or excuse me, the impacts from both sites. And that will, I don't want to get into the whole discussion of economic impact theory and definitions, but essentially various types of impacts from spending that will be captured locally based on the usage of the facility. The other things we've been asked to do, and this is kind of a attachment to what the first part, is that we'll be looking at the potential for spin-off development at both sites, and that's based on, and my colleague Lance Harris is dealing with that in more detail than I am, and he's not here today, but I can speak for him. Essentially looking at, again, surrounding the two sites, what parcels are available, and we'll be looking at some different scenarios and what we anticipate realistically could be redeveloped based on, again, having this facility here and all the traffic that will be brought to the site. So we'll be making, again, some assumptions on redevelopment and what that translates into property tax revenues, potentially. We'll also be looking at, as I said before, what has happened in other communities who have developed facilities like this in downtown and non-downtown settings. And the last major piece is really just kind of looking at some qualitative impacts, which are essentially quality of life factors that communities often see from these kinds of facilities. Those are the main, and sorry, one other main task is looking at, just from the construction project itself, what effect that it may have on the two immediate sites in terms of business disruption or the ongoing operations at the convention center and arena or anything else along those lines. And for something like that, we're going to be working, and some of these other things, we're working very closely with Mortensen and St. Combs on those. So those are the main tasks that we'll be doing. Hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Councilor Erpenbach.
Questions for the mayor.
Oh, whoever you'd like.
I was just waiting, get everybody else's questions done. You said in your presentation that you have faith in us as a council, and the city has faith in us as a council. My question is, what are your expectations of us? You know, I know that when this goes to the ballot, part of our responsibility is to ask the people of Sioux Falls, are you willing to spend the money on this? That means, are we going to bond it? What are we going to do? We're all putting in $10, whatever it is. We need to put that on the ballot. But what is the rest of the expectation from us? Is it also to choose the site, or will you dictate where the site is going based on the studies? And how then do those studies get us to that point?
I think you folks can determine your expectations. I personally, as mayor, I can't put anything on the ballot. That has to go through you. In fact, today, if the city council wanted to, put something on the ballot today involving the event center, you have the ability to do that today. And I wouldn't tell you not to do that. I want to see the event center option offered to the public and let them make a decision. However, I also said I would help lead this effort as well, Councilor Erpenbach, and my plan is to let these experts do their work. They will put together more facts than we've ever had in this process before. And then after you've had an opportunity to answer or ask as many questions as you can of them or of me or of my team, then I am planning on coming back to the City Council with an option for you to consider, something to put on the ballot. And then my expectation would be that you would question the heck out of it. You would, just like you've been doing today, you've been trying to represent your constituents as best you can. Some of you do it differently than others, but it's a good process. I think the challenge is that I've never done this before. Part of me thought that we were going to be a lot farther than where we already are today. But because we wanted to maybe do it right, because we wanted to be more methodical in nature, such as even evaluating different sites. It does take time. And because of that, then you have just so many other things that you consider. So I guess my expectations are, Councilor Urbanbach and the rest of the team, if you can just stay patient, stay diligent, stay professional, stay fair, I think that we're going to get through this thing. In the communities where it's failed, it's where there was no common ground. People just chose things to nitpick and disagree, and ultimately they didn't care less about the event center. It came down to posturing, it came down to politics, it came down to innuendo, and that's going to kill the project. I don't think we're going to do that here in Sioux Falls. I think that ultimately we will find that common ground, and then we will put it to a ballot. But only you good folks will decide.
So following that, then, I want to make sure that I hear what you're saying to me, that you are going to come to the council with, number one, yes, we're going to ask whether we're going to pay for it or not. Number two, you're going to say to us, here's my choice for the site. Do you like it or not, basically?
We're
going to do thumbs up or thumbs down on one site.
Right. If you folks don't, and that wasn't meant as a threat. It was, if the city council doesn't do it, then yes, I will bring forth a recommendation for the city council to consider to put on the ballot. And it will include things, again, I'll have to work with Dave Feifley on this, because I don't know how much detail has to go into it, such as, do you put the number of seats on there, David? Do you put all that? I don't know. But ultimately, I'll work with David and, of course, all of you to put forth something that the city can consider.
So if I can just continue, then the biggest, you ask me what questions do I hear. The number one question I hear from people is, when will the council vote on the location? And my answer is, I don't know, and I'm not sure we get to vote on that. And so what you're telling me is that that's going to kind of be up to us, you think, or you're going to bring something to us?
Well, you folks can decide what goes on the ballot. So
Okay.
If you want to vote on the location, I'll leave that up to you to vote on the location. What I'm going to do is I will bring forth a recommendation for you to consider. And if you want to have a public vote on the location, you can certainly do that. I don't recommend it, because then you're going to have a public vote on how big it should be, and then you're going to have a public vote on where your parking lot should be, and then you're going to have a public vote on how wide the seats should be. But
if I could, two more
please.
things then. One is that I wasn't here in those days, but it's my understanding that when the arena was built, the vote went down at least once, if not twice, before it was actually built. And there are people nodding their heads in the background. So I know that there's some history to us, not necessarily voting yay the first time. The second thing I would ask then is about Dan. Dan Mells said to us that we really need to vote in November to make sure that we take advantage of the costs and the expenses as the way they are right now. Can you talk about that timeline from your perspective and from our perspective? How do you think that fits in our workflow?
Well, and I'm learning as I go too, Councilor Urbanbach. In fact, that may be one of the things that we also bring up maybe in 2 weeks or at least 4 weeks at a minimum. I'm learning as I go, and I'm working with David Feifley and his team. In terms of how do you put things on the ballot, what is the time frame that you have to make this happen? I will say that I am really pushing these professionals to get it done as fast as possible because the timeline is tight. I think it's mid-June that at least I would have to bring something to you folks to consider. And this is March. So, March, April, and May is really when we're going to have to, at least I'm going to have to come to you folks with something that I believe is worthy of your consideration and certainly worthy of the people of Sioux Falls, their consideration. So to answer your question, Councilor Urbanbach, it is getting tight, but I still believe that it is doable. But I've said this too, and I mean it sincerely. I want to do this right. I don't want to do it fast. But it's one of those things that you have to balance. I listen to Mortensen, I listen to St. Combs, and I listen to those folks, and they talk about how we should have built it, a year ago or 2 years ago when there was such unbelievable bidding environment. And now, part of me is saying, boy, I wish the economy wasn't doing well so that the bidding environment would stay good. But guess what? The economy's improving. And so the expenses are going to go up, and it's going to go up, $2 to $4 to $5 million every year. And that's where we're trying to find that balance. I know some of you don't even want it built, and I respect that. And I know some of you do want it built, but you're probably struggling with the timing, and I respect that. And then there's some of you who definitely want it built, but you're trying to evaluate those priorities right now, and I respect that. But ultimately, it's going to have to come down to, at some point in time, we got to put a stake in the ground, and then move forward, and ultimately let the people decide. But Councilor Urbanbach, it's getting very tight. That's why I think I would love to bring these folks back, have you garner as many questions as you can in the next 2 weeks. We'll get those going. Then 2 weeks later, hopefully we'll have a pretty good recommendation from them. And then soon after that, if you folks don't bring forth something, then I will for you to consider. And then hopefully we've met the time frame of Deborah Owen and her team, and so we follow the rules of Sioux Falls city government, and then we'll either go or no go. Good questions, Councilor Urbanbach.
Councilor Brown.
The current facility was built for basketball. The Fargo Dome was built for football. The Tyson Center was built for hockey. What is our main user of this proposed facility?
All of the above except for real football. I mean, we did the Fargo Dome. So basically in this, and to make these buildings work financially, you usually need an anchor tenant, which the most popular is hockey. In this case, you guys got hockey, football, and then basketball. So the only question we have and needs to be answered is, does the basketball team also move to this building? Does it stay at the old one? Because that works, it's a better floor. That's not even official hockey floor at the existing arena. So, and it's got all those sorts of problems. So we're assuming, this building would be built for flexibility to do those anchor teams, wrestling, equestrian events, rodeo, PBR, pop concerts, rock concerts, country concerts, all of those things in there. Big tire events, you name it, you will be able to do it in this arena. And hopefully you'll be able to do it at a scale that works far better for these type of events than versus, say, Fargo that we did. Fargo's great for football, certain other events, when Guns N' Roses was there, or Garth Brooks, huge concert stadium, great. Not so good for littler events. We want this to be good for littler events, medium events, and big events.
So what's the order of things in terms of getting commitments from those sports teams so we know whether they're going to use that facility or not or stay in the existing arena?
Well, I think that's again, an ongoing discussion that we need to have with them. But again, I think it would make sense that certainly for hockey and football, they should be in this building. And I think there's a separate discussion with basketball because, again, and part of it is David's economic analysis. Do we want to have the ability to have more events in there? What's the role of the arena? Those kind of things. I think that needs to be answered. But regardless, we are going to design this building for basketball. It'll be good for basketball because you're going to have state tournaments, regional tournaments, all of those kind of things will be important here. So we'll design it for basketball and every possible sport. And then it's just an economic analysis of who you want. But, for instance, if any of the anchor tenants didn't want to come, then it doesn't make a lot of sense.
And in your experience, are all buildings being built that flexible today?
Most buildings, if they have any sense. Not every building, but most buildings.
Did you want to name those?
No. I've done that in the past, and that wasn't a good thing. 2 or 5 years ago, I'm not going to do that again. So, no. You want to have it flexible. It's a long, as you've seen from your old arena, these buildings last a long time. So it needs to be really thought out for sight lines, for flexibility, for intimacy of seeing the action. It's got to be a great building. And again, part of it is standards have changed. People want more restrooms, more concessions, especially women. Your women's restrooms are horrible at the existing building. You really have to make it a friendlier place, and that will do all of that we're going to be doing.
Thank you.
Don, if you could stay for a second. I have a
Sure.
question at least.
Okay.
If anybody else? Don, did you mention that the arena site does not have a score, or you're working on the score? of the site?
We are working on it.
You're working on it.
Yes. And again, a large part of it is to really, as I said, to have a key understanding of what any potential conflicts are, how many parking spaces we need, and what that impact has on the capital cost of the building, or if it affects any of the economic impact. It probably won't, but it will affect capital costs. Parking affects capital costs, so we have to understand that before we give it the ratings.
Okay, when you normally, you do a lot of site selections for other.
Right.
What is the normal process when you are in other markets giving as far as trying to determine the best location? What do you?
Yeah, sometimes they will have already decided this. Sometimes it becomes clearer because of an overriding thing, such as, like Lincoln, we're next to the university, and if we want that anchor tenant, we're going one place or nowhere because they won't take it anywhere else. So that makes your decision easy. But often cities do go through this. So part of it is, again, to go through this kind of economic analysis. Do you want to go, in your case, as I said, the good news is you have two areas where you do have a lot of parking. You don't have everything you need, but you have a lot of parking. Other people want to go on a green site or whatever. It's just, a lot of it is the politic will. Sometimes we have put them next to a mall so they can, try to push the retail. Often that's too much conflict in one area. Other times we put them next to a casino because that's the funding mechanism, stuff like that. So every city is different, but they go through this same kind of analysis. It is rare, I will tell you, to do this detailed of an economic analysis. Other cities have done it, but often we've done it and it's kind of similar to 5 years ago. People are guessing and making assumptions. That's why we've taken all the economics out of ours. So you're doing a very thoughtful process, I think. But again, we're basing all of this on the past studies that have been done that said you should do a 12,000-seat arena. That's the market. We haven't thrown out past studies that you've done, and we're hopefully building on those.
So if we had asked you to start over from scratch and not given you any determination of the location, the downtown region or the arena site, if we would have just said, Don, come help us find the best spot in our city.
And that, yes.
How much more would it have cost us?
Hardly anything, because we've already done that. If we hadn't have done it, you would have hired someone else that would have cost you more. But we did that 5 years ago, and I don't think conditions have changed enough in Sioux Falls in 5 years. But back then, we looked at virtually what we thought at the time, what the committee thought that was advising City Council and the mayor, every reasonable site, whether it was the mall, vacant fields outside, by the colleges, by the quarry, by the fair, downtown, on and on and on. And the two sites that raised to the top were the convention center and Sharapa, the exact same sites. And again, I didn't know this time. I thought there might be a better downtown site. But of the reasonably available downtown sites, this was the best one.
Okay, very good.
Got it?
Yeah, thank you. Mayor, I do have a couple of questions for you, if I could. Have you had a chance to introduce Kendra to the council and or even this project? Has she had a chance to get involved in this process and given you any insight? I know she's new, but certainly
yes,
this would be...
Councilor Jameson is talking about Kendra Simmonsma. Kendra Simmonsma is a special projects manager that the city hired 2 weeks ago, and I'm very, very pleased to have her on the team. Councilor Jameson, what I've asked her to do is to not only get engaged in this particular project, but just about all the others that are going on in city government right now. But I also asked her to go at a slow, methodical process because she comes from business, and she's even more hungry than me to get a lot of stuff done. To answer your question, she is just skimming the surface of this one right now, but we do believe that at some point in time she'll get more and more engaged in it as we go. In fact, one of the steps is having her attend this meeting here today, as well as other meetings to come in the future.
Okay, another couple questions for you, and I don't mean to potentially push your button, but I may. On slide number 6, if you could, I think it's 6. It's the quote that you added. this one. You know, couple things I got to say. You know, we, at least some of us, I know I have on this council at least, have wanted an event center before you ever wrapped your truck with a My Man Mike sticker. So this is a discussion that's been going on for a long time. But please tell me this is not the first time that you've realized this quote. You added it for our exposure or something, but tell me this isn't the first time that you've realized there would be sacrifices.
Yeah, this wasn't my quote, Councilor Jameson. This is
You've
a quote.
added it to this presentation for some purpose. Tell me. It is not the first
because it is truly, you have to make choices. When you have a $100 million investment, you're going to have to make choices on this. And that's why it was there. Every month, I think you're seeing that we're talking more and more about different aspects of this project. The thing that I talked about more and more today was the money side of the equation. We're getting closer to getting the location thing built. Now I'm trying to transition towards that money, towards those choices, towards those priorities. I hope we're not too late, Councilor Brown, but I'm trying to begin that. And as part of that discussion, this is such a key point, is that you are going to have sacrifices. I think it was last month that even Councilor Brown talked about making sure that we put it into the budget so that you can actually see what does have to be, I don't want to say sacrificed, but maybe delayed, or maybe not even done at all, or sacrificed. And so that's why I thought this quote from a member of the Sports Authority was just so relevant at this time.
Okay, thank you. Maybe the next slide as well.
Sure.
You talk about nice to haves. Short terms will conflict with longer term. What would you describe as a nice to have?
There's all kinds of things. I mean, it depends on someone's priorities. One of the things that I've learned is that different constituents have different priorities that they have. Different councilors have different priorities that they have. As mayor, I have different priorities that I have. The one thing, though, that truly will probably be sacrificed along the way are just some of those nice-to-haves that don't go as high on the priority scale as maybe we would all like. And that's just reality, that those are going to have to be pushed back or eliminated entirely whenever you build a $100 million project or invest in a $100 million project like we've had.
Just then, maybe from your perspective, nice to have. So what do you envision? I know you've had to contemplate some of the things that we're going to have to do without, and some of the things that you'd like to have done as well, I'm sure. But
I'll give you a perfect example. When I was at Premier and when I was at Citibank, we spent so much time working with the community and the nonprofits and those organizations that do so much to improve the quality of life for the less fortunate or people that are struggling. And one of the things that and Mayor Munson had to do it, and I'm having to do it too, is we're having to make tough choices. And a lot of these organizations that we always wanted to support or that we used to support, now we're cutting back on it. And it hurts. It hurts. Even in this budget in 2012, there are nonprofits that we probably normally would fund at a rate, and I'm going to have to cut back on those to help address some of these things. The operational expenses, for example, as Councilor Brown knows full well, the operational expenses with a facility like this, we're going to have to find a way to cover. And when you do that, it takes money out of somewhere else that normally we would do. You know, nice to have. My gosh, I grew up with nothing. I remember what it was like to go to use the pool for free and to do things like that. And remember, even last session we talked about, boy, we don't want to eliminate those nice to have things for those less fortunate. But those are some of the tough choices that we're going to have to make.
okay, that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilor Jameson.
Thank you, Councilor Brown.
Maybe not really a question, Mayor, but more of a comment. You often talk about the speed at which business can operate. I don't know the credit card industry, but I would tell you there are reasons government does move slowly at times. We're not spending one person's money here. We're spending every citizen's tax dollars here. The other comment I would have, even in the business world, where I come from, we've spent 8 years discussing building just a $10 million facility. So I think it's unfair when you're critical of government saying it moves slowly. So I would just ask that not all businesses operate like credit card companies, and that to some that may be offensive.
Yeah, and I don't think that I've termed that government is moving slow. But I know I have said that generally it is moving slower than what I'm used to. But I'm learning as well. I know that there are benefits to having it move slow. Councilor Erpenbach's question involved the timing of the vote. And that's why I brought that up today, is because the process has been slower than what I had imagined going into it. Okay, it wasn't to characterize government as not being efficient enough or this process has not moved fast enough. I was answering Councilor Erpenbach's question in terms of how the timing relates to this vote. And I've learned. Again, I thought that, number one, I didn't know that I had to bring this to the City Council by mid-June. I didn't understand that. That is a process. That is a part of the system that makes government strong, but actually also has to make me adjust. And I just learned that, Councilor Brown, coming from the banking world. But because it is June, now I'm trying to evaluate, okay, how do we get this done, or can we even get this done? So I'm not trying to criticize city government. I'm not trying to criticize government in general, but it is reality. There are things that happen in government that do not happen in business. And I'm learning as I go along the way. And Councilor Brown, if I've offended you or I've offended anybody else in city government or in government as a general, I certainly apologize. I am learning. You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Anything else that we need to discuss today?
Can I just throw out a couple of thoughts?
You bet.
And I don't want to be characterized as a naysayer, because I do support the event center no matter where it ends up happening. I've had that conversation with a lot of people. But I think that we need to understand that November deadline is exactly what the mayor said. It's getting really tight. And then I want you to understand, we need to say this out loud and we need to acknowledge it to the public, that at the same time that we're going to look at putting that on the ballot, we're also going to be asked to raise your sewer rates in order to build the infrastructure that is falling apart. And at the same time that we're being asked to put this event center on the ballot, we will also be experiencing the beginning of the state budget cuts on July 1st, and that will include 3,000 teachers and staff members from the Sioux Falls School District alone who will take pay cuts. That is what their contract says. They're going to join thousands of other people in Sioux Falls who have taken pay cuts for various reasons in the last few years, and we're going to dump this all on people at the same time. I, again, don't want to be a naysayer, but I want to be realistic about this, and I think as a council we need to think in those terms, that yes, we may end up making this happen in some way, but let's be realistic about it, and let's think about this very carefully.
Councilor Intiman.
Councilor Erpenbach, I agree. The thing about where we're at right now with the event center discussion is that we're further along than we ever have been before. And to me, it's quite exciting to see the pieces finally dropping in. And the questions that we've been asking for so many years are finally starting to get answered. And you're correct. You know, I think we look at this as opportunities, but there are some challenges. There's no doubt about it. And I think the bottom line at the end of the day is that with the information that we will be presented, we will have the opportunity to make those decisions. And it's going to be the choice of all the voters that are out there to make that decision. To me, it's exciting to look forward to it. You know, I will pass this on from a retailer standpoint right now. I'm getting excited about the coming years because I'm starting to see some movement in young adult sales, for example. We're starting to see the people coming back and starting to buy. People are getting excited again. So I think there are some changes coming down the pike, and it's going to take a year or so, but I think we're ahead of the game with this event center, and hopefully we can make everything work, and it's going to be good for the community.
Listening to Councilor Erpenbach, it did remind me I'd like to bring up one other item and wonder if the fiscal committee would like to look at this. But I was wondering if we should take a minute to evaluate and or at least quantify all the dollars that we receive through the federal government and from the state, the city, what the city receives from the federal government and from the state, and frankly, any other non-city money. Just how much money is flowing into our city from those other agencies, so we know where that's at. You know, for instance, transit receives just a ton of federal aid. What's going to happen if they change the rules on us? What would we do? I think it'd just be good for us to be prepared for that. And I don't know if we have that sheet. Maybe we have that sheet somewhere else where it just tells us. Is that right, Tracy? I'm getting a nod. Come on up.
The directors have been working on updating that information of particularly the federal funding that is received. So that's kind of a work in progress right now. I believe it was done a year or two ago. So that's being updated. It's just coincidentally that you bring it up tonight. But as soon as that information is available, I'm sure we'll happily share that with you folks.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Is that Councilor Brown?
You know, at our monthly school, county, city meetings, we should probably have the discussion there about what impact this could have in terms of timing with those governments, because the counties are suffering as well. And if the school district has to opt out at some point too, all of that timing needs to be put into consideration on when we put this to the ballot. So I think the school district is in charge of those meetings this year. I'm looking at Debbie Hoffman. So maybe that's a topic we could address. Debbie, you're welcome to come up.
I could speak to the group because I was the only member of the Sioux Falls City Council at the last meeting, partly because there was a flood meeting, and I understand that, but somebody had to be at the school board meeting as well. I encourage my colleagues to be there. They have scheduled for the next meeting a speaker who is going to talk about comprehensive tax policy, for one thing, and then we're also going to, we spent quite a bit of time this last week talking about those ramifications, and actually the numbers I was spewing to you were from that meeting, that we really do, as a region, we've got 7 school districts that are inside our city limits. 7 school districts that are affected by those state budget cuts. We're going to have to be really cognizant of how those things fit together, and we need to attend those meetings where all of us are involved, because it is city, county, school boards, and city councils from around the area. So I invite you to be there. You get it on your calendar every month, and it goes out as a public notice. Please be there, because the next speaker is going to be awesome. Not to scold you or anything, but seriously, people.
I do feel, okay. All right, just another reminder that the joint city-county meeting, joint city-Minnehaha County Commission meeting for next week has been canceled. So don't show up here for that. We do have an informational, I believe, but the 5 o'clock joint meeting would not happen.
No. We have a land use committee meeting following the informational meeting. There is not a 7 o'clock meeting with Lincoln County next Monday night. Correct, Tamara?
The joint was canceled for today.
Today?
Yeah.
See, we missed it. If they were here, we apologize to all you Minnehaha County people. Okay, today. I'm a little getting caught up here. Also, just want to add a note on the audit committee meeting tomorrow at 4. We are reviewing the Railroad Relocation Fund, the Great Plains Zoo, and the Delbridge Museum audits, I believe, are the only ones. Is that right? Okay. Anything else we need to cover? Anybody? Otherwise, we are adjourned. Thank you.